It's a diagram relating to software thesis, and he explains how Bitcoin adoption reduces the profitability of kinetic warfare. I think this is one of his better diagrams. And can we explain what's going on here? Obviously, the top, he's identifying that these are assets that carry a monetary premium that we defend with human lives. And now what he means by that, as I understand it, is, well, when you're printing money, the money doesn't function to store purchasing power over time or as a store of value, as people typically call it. Therefore, people being rational, they start to sell the currency and buy something that is not counterfeited in that way. So something that does store purchasing power across time. Things like real estate, commodities, equities. And they're defended with human lives, military and rule of law. So how does he contrast that to Bitcoin? He shows all of these things collapsing into Bitcoin. What does this diagram mean?
So if I were to lean on my experience in lending, one of the things that pushed me towards understanding Bitcoin was all of the subsidies that came out during 2020 as a result of COVID, the pandemic. We saw real estate values for agriculture jump 30 to 40% in 6 months. And what everybody thought was, there's the saying in agriculture that if you own dirt, you can't get hurt, right? You can always recapitalize. You can always borrow against your dirt because they ain't making any more of it, right? And so it pays to own that. But my previous career as a financial advisor taught me cash is trash. Cash is trash because the longer you hold it, the less you can buy with it. And so what do is you put it into these monetized assets: land, real estate, gold, oil, equities. And they have two things in common. One is that they can be manipulated, all of them. And they have been over time to incredible degrees. Like we just saw over the last 8 months, the dumping of our strategic petroleum reserve in order to slightly depress the cost of gasoline so that the woke could have a fighting chance of getting some votes, and have opened ourselves up to a great threat by doing that. But the other thing that they have in common is that they can be seized. They can be taken. And so what is Jason, I forget his last name, but hard money you can't fuck with, right? We cross that line, and that's the difference, is that you cannot take that orange thing. You cannot take that away. You can't manipulate it. You can't do anything to it. But I can go to the housing market, and if I really want to destroy the value of the housing market, all I have to do is put a 80% death tax on a home. All I have to do is do to homeowners what the Russians did to farmers with the kulaks, and declaring them a oppressive class simply because they owned something that had risen in such great value relative to the fiat that surrounded it. I guess that's kind of my take on it from where I came from.
Yeah.
And
I agree that they can't be seized. These all have a physical substrate. They exist in the realm of mass. And so one of the insights at the beginning of the book, one of the inspirations is mass equals energy. Einstein, of course, has his equation. Lowery mentions it at the beginning. If you can swap energy for mass, then the world of mass is where you get bodies on the ground and explosions and death and dying. In the world of energy, things can become abstract and yet still provably real through the expenditure of energy. And so I think that's what that line indicates. Above, they depend on some sort of thing in the real world, whereas Bitcoin, its presence, its footprint in the real world is decentralized. Yeah. So you can't just stamp it out and go to one place to seize it. So I think that's what this gets at.
I think that's a great foundational viewpoint on it, is that those things ultimately have mass, and Bitcoin is massless. And that's why he writes in there that the mass based assets, the chain of custody of these assets is written in blood, right? Military and rule of law, whereas Bitcoin is defended with electricity and code. And then his concluding remark is that not having to waste human life to defend monetized wealth is worth every watt, right? It is just the most efficient and peaceful means of preserving wealth over time, right? And it creates incentives. We mentioned that it's, highly concealable, hyper portable. This creates incentives for cooperation and trade rather than coercion and exploitation, where, real estate would be a painful opposite, right? It's not concealable at all. It's not portable at all. And what is most of human history characterized by is people fighting over land, right? Literally invading other people to take land. So Bitcoin's like an inversion of the paradigm in a way. And again, maybe that's why it's technologically sophisticated, but it's also ideologically just groundbreaking. Like if you were talking about this 30 years ago, like massless wealth that's secured by a global electricity network, it's like people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? How could that possibly ever be a thing? But actually, you know what? You did bring up Henry Ford.
Yeah.
And was it
1921.
Edison? Who else?
Tesla.
Tesla. Maybe we should actually. There were people thinking about this.
Right. Yeah. To kind of break into that idea and to go back even further, this is a concept that I learned from Lynn Alden's book, Broken Money, was that we have really been searching for an electric currency ever since we created the telegraph, because when we created the telegraph, our ability to do business outran our ability to settle business.
Communications outran our ability
Settlement.
to move money, basically.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Because you had to physically move that.
We could
thing.
only move promises. We couldn't move money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's this misheld belief in the Bitcoin community and maybe the internet community writ large, which is that we've been searching for that was a whistle. We've been searching for an internet money since we created the internet. But in truth, we have been searching for a electric money since we created electric communications, which greatly predates. And Tesla and Henry Ford in the same epoch, Tesla in 1900, Henry Ford in 1921, they separately had ideas. Tesla had the idea that in the future, we would have energy competitions using electricity between intelligent machines with human out of the loop. He theorized and prophesized non-lethal warfare. And at the same time, 21 years later, Henry Ford, having become convinced that gold causes war because gold, due to the characteristics that it has, must be centralized because it is so value dense once you believe in it as money that you cannot simply carry it around. It has to be pushed together.
Lacks portability.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Lacks portability.
Yeah.
This, by the way, is the thing that I learned from you that took me down this path, which is, the characteristics of money. And in 1921, Henry Ford buys a dam in the state of, I believe, Georgia for $30 million, intending to use it to create hydroelectric power and to use that electric power to power a currency that would replace gold and end war. And this is such a common theme among Bitcoiners, is that if you take money printing out of the hands of government, we cannot have these forever wars. I mean, there is the great argument that we have been in continuous wars since the Fed was created. Like a year to the day after the Fed was created, we enter World War I on some fairly auspicious grounds.
Yeah.
The blowing up of the Lusitania after all of these people had advocated against getting on that ship because they were aware that there was a plot in order to blow it up. So another thing that Ford envisioned, and he got this right, was that not only did the currency have to be electric, it had to be limited. And so what do we have with Bitcoin? We have hashing machines battling it out in cyberspace, human out of the loop, no people, no bodies on the ground, no blood, a limited currency powered by electricity. And you know, you can have your own thoughts and you can have your own justifications, but man, if you're going to get behind and hitch your wagon to a couple of people that have good ideas, Ford and Tesla, that's not a bad path to follow, right?
Indeed.
It's a good jumping off point, right? So,
no, it's well said. Anything to add to that?
No, I don't. That is like Tesla and Henry Ford as antecedent theorizers to Lowery. That shows you the depth of his thesis and like the historical precedent.
For sure. And I was saying how difficult it would be to ever formulate this prior to Bitcoin's emergence, but indeed, there were very deep, intelligent thinkers that come before us, and they were thinking about it, man. And
it gives credence to Lowery, right?
Yeah,
He's not the first guy to wave this flag.
Of course.
Right? Yeah.
And it also, there's like this sort of just idiosyncratic thing that we're dealing with, right? It's like gold is just not portable, basically, which is it's like such an obscure kind of esoteric thing. You're like, what do you mean this like lack of a monetary property is the reason we have raging warfare and centralized power structures? Like, but I really believe it. You know, it's like to scale this thing as a globally transactable currency, we need to put it all in one place and put a derivative on top of it called a banknote. Well, once you put all that purchasing power in one place, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. A lot of people hate that quote, but you put all the, it's a honeypot basically, right? So now the institutions that grow up around that, well, surprise, surprise, they're extremely corrupt because they have a lot of power. You have to trust them a lot, right? It's not zero trust, permissionless, egalitarian. It's the exact opposite. It's high trust, it's inegalitarian, and it's heavily permissioned, right? They'll kick you off the Swift network whenever they want or whatever the thing may be, or they'll print as much money as they want. And so what do we get? We get the lifeblood of the global economy is pathologized. And every institution, every individual, which is every institution and every individual that uses money, gets sick as a result. And so that's this money, what is money question. Like it becomes spiritual at some point. So it sounds woo-woo spiritual, but it's really rooted, I think, in just this technical flaw, or this glitch in money, which is that we just had gold that's not portable. If we somehow had gold that was super light and highly transactable across space, we may not have any of these problems, which is crazy to think about.
When we create justifications around that, I have this, I took a quote from Marcus Aurelius, which is, there is no good nor bad, but thinking makes it so, and apply that to Gresham's law. And Gresham's law is that bad money pushes out good. But let's just get rid of good and bad, and let's simply say that money that does not satisfy all the characteristics of money that allow it to fulfill the purposes of money, it needs an alternative in order to fulfill those. Like fiat was a very envisionable result of gold because of its lack of portability. And so this takes me to where I kind of think of the future, which is I do not see there's so many people right now that are envisioning a future where fiat and Bitcoin live side by side. And I don't see that because there is no reason to have fiat if you have a money that satisfies when I first heard you talk about it, it was 5 characteristics of money, but you can extrapolate, you know, there's more like 10 or 8 or 9,
5 to 15,
right?
Like it depends how you chop it up.
It doesn't matter. It's on the top of the podium getting the gold prize for every single one of those, right? So this is the ultimate warrior, right?
Other than like track record, because it's new, right? It's like, okay, it's young. That's basically the only drawback. But from a technical standpoint, it outperforms everything big time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.